Hey, and welcome to Wild Seat. Hang tight, boss. This is where it gets good. When the gates of hell swing wide open, a host of demons pour out, slaughtering humans like sheep in a slaughterhouse. In the face of these monsters, humanity is nothing more than a lamb before the wolf, and the entire world becomes a hell on earth. The emergence of these demons stems from an ancient legend, the kind that gives you goosebumps. In times of yore, human armies would face off against creatures of the shadows. The immortal Blood Queen, Nimue, an old wicked witch, spread a deadly plague and threatened to wipe the human race off the face of the earth. Finally, a lad named Arthur steps up. Accompanied by the supreme wizard Merlin, he pretends to surrender to the dark creatures. In a moment of carelessness from Nimue, a soldier throws his spear and sticks it in a tree. The dark creatures surrounding her try to advance, but with Merlin's magic they scatter like rats. But beware, Nimue isn't dead. Mortal weapons can't even tickle her. In her rage, Nimue begins to release the plague again. In this moment of tension, Arthur draws his sword. The king's sword first slices off her summoning arm and then beheads Nimue. However, Nimue's magic is stronger than a bull. Before dying, she transfers all her blood to the tree. To seal Nimue's body, Arthur divides her into 6 pieces, and each one is locked in a different box. Then, they are sealed by saints, and finally, brave knights bury them in different corners of the world. And suddenly we find ourselves 1,000 years later. Hellboy is a paranormal investigator, a tough guy who deals with things that would make you shake with fear. One of his teammates has been assigned to investigate a vampire's lair, but contact with him is lost for 3 weeks. When Hellboy finds him in the wrestling ring, he's lost himself. He lunges at Hellboy like a madman. Taken aback, Hellboy gets serious. He quickly takes control of his teammate, but when he lifts his hood, he discovers he's turned into a vampire. Hellboy, caught off guard, is thrown to the ground in an instant. The vampire begins to attack with his long, sharp claws. In desperation, Hellboy has to defend himself with his arms outstretched. At this moment, the referee pulls out a cross. While the vampire is about to change target, Hellboy arrives from behind just in time. But wait, there's more. The vampire spreads his wings again in a flash. This time, Hellboy doesn't show an iota of mercy. After blocking the vampire's frantic attack, he throws him out of the ring like a sack of potatoes. In agony, his teammate reverts back to human form. Before kicking the bucket, he drops a prophecy on Hellboy. The end of the world is coming, and Hellboy is the one who's setting it off. Then, Hellboy returns to the Bureau for Paranormal Research, but before he can take a nap, his father gives him a new mission. In the blink of an eye, Hellboy finds himself at the Sorceress Club, an organization that, like the Paranormal Bureau, has been cracking down on dark forces for centuries. There, Hellboy discovers the true reason for this mission. Turns out that a long time ago, giants ruled the earth. Although humans eventually finished them off, the corpses of the giants still lie buried underground. The thing is, giants have a habit of turning into zombies after biting the dust, rising from their graves to raise hell. Upon catching the drift, Hellboy and the club go on a hunting expedition. Intelligence reports indicate that the giants have appeared in a forest. But when the team arrives, the giants have already skedaddled, leaving only a few human bodies behind. Following the giants' footprints, they find a perfect spot to ambush them. But while they prepare their mission, Hellboy is ambushed by a member of the expedition. It turns out the mission was a setup. After learning about the prophecy of the end of the world, the club's real target was Hellboy. Caught flat-footed, Hellboy leaps off the bridge, closely pursued by the expedition. Despite his resistance, Hellboy ends up being subdued by the hunting team. The captain pulls out his secret weapon, a potent electric current that leaves Hellboy stiff in an instant. Just as the captain is about to behead Hellboy, he freezes as he sees his own head flying off first. Emerging from the water, Hellboy discovers that the hunting team has been wiped off the map. Turns out they've all become food for the giants. As he watches from the shadows, another giant approaches from behind and attacks Hellboy without further ado. Barely has Hellboy recovered when another giant lunges at him. Facing the onslaught, he rips out a tree and throws it at his enemy, hitting him in the eye. Other giants come to his aid, but this giant seems to have 2 brain cells and ends up attacking his own kind. Hellboy is lucky to escape but is thrown into the air by a hammer blow. Before he can recover, Another giant lunges at him. After dodging the first attack, Hellboy counterattacks immediately. His mechanical right hand has the power of a demon, and with a single blow, he manages to unbalance the giant. He then hits him in the eye, and with a howl, the giant quickly loses balance. Hellboy rips out another tree and drives it through the body of the giant. But he has no time to rest, for the last of the giants comes for him. Hellboy tries to dodge him with his agile body, but the giant throws him aside. However, he lands right next to a large sword. Although it's a giant's weapon, Hellboy lifts it without hesitation and finishes off the giant. When everything calms down, he collapses on the ground, exhausted. Meanwhile, a group of dark creatures is plotting in the shadows. They are preparing to awaken the sealed Nimue. Soon, a dark figure arrives at the monastery. Then a pig-like demon breaks through the door. After eliminating all the rebels, the pig demon takes the last of the saints to the chamber, where he finds the chest that seals Nimue. To break the seal, the saint has to recite a spell. Faced with the saint's refusal, the pig demon rips out his tongue and immediately places it in his own mouth. And so, as the pig demon recites the spell with a human voice, the seal on the chest finally breaks. Inside, Nimue, who has been sleeping like a log for 1,000 years, awakens. Our swine demon is on a roll, stumbling upon bits of Nimue everywhere. Meanwhile, our hellish hero Hellboy stirs from his nap, rescued by his colleague Alice, a gal with more psychic powers than Professor Xavier. Soon after, his old man shows up, bringing along the new team buddy, Colonel Daimyo, a guy capable of transforming. Not bad, huh? They kick off their grand scheme, taking a tour back to Club Acelius because that's where a piece of Nimue was stashed. When they arrived, they're met with a pretty grim scene. The club, utterly wrecked. But thanks to Alice's psychic antenna, they connect with the ghost of the club's big boss. That's how they learn that Nimue is looking for her king, whose return would mean the apocalypse. But before he could spill more, the ghost, scared out of his wits by the killer still lurking, takes off, and at that moment, an eerie noise puts them on guard. Hellboy, faster than Flash, dashes towards the noise. The demonic pig was still lurking around. With a wallop from Hellboy, Nimue's last arm emerges from hiding. It seemed like Hellboy had everything under control, with the demon pig in check. But suddenly, as if by magic, Nimue's ghost appears. But noticing Hellboy's hellish might, she doesn't attack. She proposes he be her king and rule the world together, and Hellboy is taken aback, but Colonel Daimyo snaps him back to reality in time with his voice. Nimue's apparition disappears, and with her, the demon pig vanishes. However, her visit was not in vain. Hellboy finally realizes who the demon pig was. Turns out 20 years ago, he had posed as Alice, trying to infiltrate the human world. But Hellboy uncovers him, and to save his skin, he had to bolt up the chimney, returning the real Alice under threat from Hellboy. Now frustrated by his pathetic attempts to be human, the demon pig has a plan: resurrect Nimue to give Hellboy his comeuppance. And at that moment, Nimue has managed to gather all her fragments. Nimue, like a goddess, resurrected in an ancient rite, rises with terrifying power, ready for her revenge. Meanwhile, Hellboy returns to base, but his encounter with his old man ends in a shouting match. At Club Osiris, Hellboy had discovered his true origin. Rewinding back to the end of World War II, the Nazis, desperate to turn the tide, resort to black magic to open the gates of hell. But the Allied forces arrive just in time, eliminate the enemies, and find a creature emerging from the inferno, a youngster who turns out to be Hellboy. Broom, instead of killing him, decides to adopt him. Now, Hellboy has his doubts. He thinks maybe Broom adopted him to turn him into a weapon, not out of affection. Angry, he storms out of the room. But as he steps into the elevator, he finds himself in the middle of a fog, and a wooden house on legs appears. Quickly, Hellboy realizes he's been dragged into an illusion created by Baba Yaga, a child blood-sucking witch whom Hellboy had blinded in one eye. Yaga offers him a deal. If Hellboy gives her one of his eyes, she'll reveal Nimue's whereabouts. Hellboy seems to agree, but once he gets the info, he backs out, infuriating Yaga, who attacks on impulse. But although she might seem disgusting, she's no match for Hellboy. Nearly defeated, Yaga casts a spell and the house collapses, sending Hellboy out of the room. When Hellboy comes to, he finds himself in his father's office. But he now knows where Nimue is. Immediately, he heads there with his team. On the other hand, Nimue arrives at Pendle Hill, where she was killed and chopped up. With a cut in the bark of the tree that witnessed her death and another in her palm, she seeks to recover the blood she left there 1,000 years ago. Upon retrieving all her blood, the wounds on her body begin to heal, restoring all her power. And as she lifts her seal, the monsters that had been sealed with her are also released. Oh boy, we're in for a wild ride. The demons kneel before Nimue, like crazed fans before a resurrected rock star. Meanwhile, Hellboy makes his stellar entrance. As soon as his helicopter lands, they race desperately up the mountain, but Nimue, ever the cunning one, already has an ambush prepared. Hundreds of zombies rise from the ground and advance toward our team, fearless of dying again. The group finds themselves in the midst of this mob of undead. At that moment, Daimyo decides that he and Alice will hold off the zombies, allowing Hellboy to advance to stop Nimue. Upon reaching the top of the hill, Hellboy launches a surprise attack on Nimue, sending the monsters around her flying. But regular weapons can't hurt Nimue, and her wounds heal in the blink of an eye. Hellboy is disarmed and knocked down. Nimue, instead of hurting Hellboy, proposes a deal again. If he agrees to be her king, together, they'll rule the world and build a new kingdom on the ashes of the old one. But Hellboy refuses, and Nimue, angered, curses Alice, who had come to his aid, and starts killing everyone Hellboy cares about to awaken the demon sleeping within him. Desperate to save his companions, Hellboy finds Merlin, the supreme wizard sleeping underground. After rescuing his companion, Hellboy learns another truth about his identity from Merlin. It turns out that Hellboy is not just the son of a demon, but also carries the power of King Arthur in his blood. Hellboy's mother was the daughter of the last Arthurian king, but ended up marrying a demon. Thus, Hellboy was born with the title of Destroyer of All. Merlin uses Hellboy's blood to summon King Arthur's most prized treasure, the King's Sword, the only weapon that can kill Nimue. As he picks up the sword, Hellboy has a vision. He sees himself with a crown of fire on his head and a destructive sword in his hand, riding a fire dragon through sky and land. Human cities lie destroyed in his path. Then he dives from the sky, and under his sharp sword all humans are finally massacred. Good heavens, what a horror. The heroic crimson figure squared off against the monstrosity that was the sword of the king. He couldn't turn into such an abomination. On the other hand, the unpleasant Nimue made her theatrical appearance in the city, spreading a deadly plague to wipe humans off the face of the earth. Without wasting time, she turned the Supernatural Defense Bureau upside down. The infamous Hellboy, receiving the news alarmingly, hurried his pace to the horror scene, only to find a picture worthy of a nightmare. Distracted but determined, he spotted the wicked Nimue on TV and headed towards her without hesitation. The city, now a spectacle of terror, was immersed under ominous clouds and the sky infested with flying demons. Upon arriving at the church, the first to intercept him was the repulsive pig demon, armed with powers bestowed by the malevolent Nimue. Not even the most ordinary bullet could tickle him. Seeing his enemy, the infernal pig had no doubts and charged. Hellboy, unwavering, faced the horror. Despite his bravery, the burly Hellboy was thrown like a doll by the beast. He narrowly avoided its next charge, rolling and grabbing an iron frame to counterattack. Even so, our red boy was no match for the muscular pig demon. Taking advantage of the situation, it attacked again, leaving Hellboy biting the dust, defenseless. That's when Daimyo decided to step out of the shadows. After injecting himself with a genetic potion, his body transformed. His hands turned into sharp claws, and with a heartbreaking howl, he drastically changed his appearance. The once human Daimyo turned into a beast and charged at the pig demon. However, the enemy's strength was such that Daimyo was sent flying like a leaf in the wind. Hellboy, regaining his composure, returned to the fray. But even together, he and Daimyo were at the mercy of the pig demon. Soon, Daimyo was knocked out and Hellboy was brought down with a single blow. The pig demon, victorious, lifted a giant rock. Just as the pig demon was about to turn Hellboy into a red pancake, Nimue appeared on the scene. But she wasn't there to do the pig's dirty work, rather to push Hellboy to the edge of the abyss. To the pig demon's displeasure, she took away its superpower. It shrank down to a miniature replica of itself, a defenseless little piggy. Nimue once again targeted Hellboy. With a magic trick, she slammed him to the ground, right where the famous sword of King Arthur lay, silently buried. But no matter how hard she pressured him, our red hero refused to pull out the sword. Frustrated, Nimue played her last card. She murdered Broom right in front of Hellboy's eyes. The sight of his father dying in his arms made Hellboy seethe with rage. Blinded by hatred, he pulled the sword from its tomb. Upon its release, the body of King Arthur dissolved into dust. Hellboy smirked sinisterly, and his horns, symbols of demonic power, grew abruptly. The king's sword had unleashed the monster within him. Devoid of reason, he transformed into a real demon. With the appearance of the infamous Hellboy, the gates of hell swung wide open. Demons of all shapes and sizes emerged, putting humanity in checkmate. These grotesque and destructive spawn left humans helpless, even ravaging entire cities. At this crucial moment, the clever Alice approached Broom's lifeless body and, using her psychic gift, invoked his spirit. Hearing his father's voice, Hellboy regained his sanity. He gripped his sword and with a single stroke, beheaded Nimue. Next, he plunged the king's sword into the ground, closing the gates of hell. The demons were dragged back to hell amid cries of despair. When calm returned, Hellboy, without hesitation, ripped off his own horns. He took Nimue's head and threw it into the magma of hell, making sure she wouldn't rise again. At the end of the movie, Broom bids farewell, stating that being Hellboy's father has been the best chapter of his life. Hellboy understands his father's love and decides to follow in his footsteps. Along with his loyal companions, he vows to protect the peace and happiness of mankind. But the adventure doesn't end here. I'll see you in the next one. Let's go.